Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the RepPath Podcast. And today we're going to talk about a real day in the life of pharma, device, capital equipment. We're going to cover a bunch of different areas of medical sales, and it's going to be real, guys. So if some of you guys don't want to hear the truth out there, then definitely don't stay on, because this is something that's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows about the industry. I want to give you guys a real picture of what you're facing every day, depending on which avenue you choose. But before we jump into that, as always, guys, any questions, please submit them into the chat now. And then, anytime from now on, submit them anytime. And then James will handle those, and we'll go over them about halfway through the show. If anybody wants to see this podcast or any other content that we produce, please go on YouTube and join my channel, the RepPath Academy. So you could get this podcast amongst everything else. Click on the link below and subscribe. Lastly, guys, anybody that is still struggling, you want to break into this industry, you're constantly getting ghosted, join the RepPath Academy. We can help you. I know that feeling when you feel like you're on an island out there. You don't know what else to do. How come no one's getting back to you? Maybe it's my resume. Maybe it's my interview skills. Maybe I'm not networking properly. Maybe my messaging isn't right. Guys, we can help you with this strategy. We've helped thousands get placed around the country. Go on our website, RepPath.com. You can see it on the screen there. Check out the testimonials. Check out the companies that we've helped place all around the country, even the world. I just actually had a candidate sign up from South Africa yesterday, which is exciting.
That's really cool.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So, but we actually have many others that are all throughout Africa, England, Europe, the rest of Europe, Middle East. I mean, it's crazy. So please, guys, submit, get on RepPath.com or send me a DM looking to get more info about the RepPath Academy so we can get you signed up today. Okay. So enough of that housekeeping. Let's dive right into today's show. So the reality of medical sales. Guys, I know most of you want to get into this industry because I hear it all the time. You can make great money. You could get to talk to doctors. You work with patients. You're on your own. You get a company car. You get an expense account. It's a lot of fun. You're in surgeries, all day, which is exciting. And a lot of that is true, but we want to keep it real of what you're really facing in each of these. So we're going to start with pharma. Okay. So typical day in pharma. And now I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash from people that are upset that, I'm a little too brutally honest. And if you disagree, that's fine. Put it into the chat. We welcome all kinds of disagreements. So please, I'm going to keep it real. I want you guys to keep it real. If you disagree with something, please submit a question, submit a comment, and happy to have that discussion with you. But the first thing when it comes to pharma sales, is the flexibility. You're going to hear, it's very flexible. And that's true. Okay. Your typical day, and I'm going to get, people that get pissed off with this. They're going to say, I work 8 to 5 every day. I call bullshit on that. Okay. There's many outstanding pharma reps that I know. Some of the top reps in many of the companies that I've worked with, that I work with now, consulting, that I work with recruiting, that are outstanding reps. They don't have to put an 8 to 5 day in, because for the most part, what you're doing, you're going into doctors' offices, and sometimes a call could be walking in, talking to the receptionist, and they're slammed. Or the doctor's not in yet. The doctor's in surgery. The doctor has another appointment. The doctor's with patients. So they tell you, Joe, sorry, today's not a good day. And you could walk in and out. All right. So a lot of times companies are expecting anywhere from 10 to 15 calls a day. Guys, sometimes you're in and out of some of these offices, quickly. Then there's times that you're sitting there sometimes for an hour to 2 hours, waiting to get a chance to spend 30 seconds with the doctor. Okay. So for some of you that aren't in this industry yet, it's not, I'm just going to walk into doctors' offices all day long and then go in the back and then start talking to doctors as they come in and out of exam rooms. And then they sit with you for 20 minutes. You tell them about your product, you detail them, showing them your detail aid, You talk about your pharmaceutical drug, and then they tell you, oh, this is great. Thank you for the information, Joe. I'm definitely going to prescribe it to the next 10 people that walk in the door. Guys, that's fantasy land. All right. You're going to learn this. They're going to teach you in training everything about the product. You're going to know it inside and out. Then you're going to do role plays with your team, with your manager, where they play the doctor, you're the rep, and you're going to go over different scenarios. And all this training is excellent, but nothing is like the real thing out there, guys. You're going to come out there and you're going to get punched in the mouth, in your first, couple of months. You're going to be like, wow, this is crazy. I do have flexibility, but the flexibility is not exactly what you think. Now, yes, you are in the car all day long. And yes, you'll have some days where you work a couple hours a day. I mean, I know some reps, they don't go in every day. They could say, you know what? I'm doing great. I don't have any appointments. I'm slammed tomorrow. So they could do double time tomorrow. You have that flexibility, guys. At the end of the day, most managers, most companies, they don't give a shit what you do as long as you're hitting your number. If you're not hitting your number, then that's when people are going to start looking and saying, what's going on? So guys, that is the number one thing. You're in sales. It's all about your number. It's all about hitting your quota. But if you're not doing that, that flexibility is going to change. They're going to start looking over your shoulder more and seeing what you're doing. They're going to see when you're entering in calls. All right. Now they might normally not care, but if you're not hitting your number and you're entering calls in at night, you're not entering in during the day, they're going to start saying, I want you to enter the calls in after you make them. Or you could have a sign-in pad with some of the companies where they make you sign in someone in the staff whenever you leave samples. Or sometimes when you just walk in an office, you need someone to sign that you've been there. Now, that's annoying, guys. It's annoying for the staff. It's annoying for you. But a lot of times they do this to track you. It's not the fun part about the job, but it changes that flexibility. So even though you say you're flexible, you can go in and out, you have that autonomy to do what you want. Again, that's true. But the reality is you have a lot of tasks throughout the day where you're technically really never fully off. And what do I mean by that? So some days, if you can't get into the doctor's office or if a doctor can't see you, you're always showing up at that office, say 9:00 every day. And then you switch it up to 11 and maybe 2 or 3, but they always can't see you. When they're seeing patients, they don't have time for you. So what do? Then you show up early. You might get in the parking lot by 7 a.m. and wait outside for the doctor to walk in. I've done this many times. This is what it takes sometimes, guys. You have to be aggressive. It's awkward. You feel like you're being annoying, but you got to believe in your product and your message that you have to feel like this is important enough that I have to get in front of this doctor and tell them because this is going to help him with his patients. So sometimes you're there early. Okay. That no one told you that. No one told me that. I'm like, wow, I got to get here this early to just meet with one doctor. Okay. Now sometimes lunches. Okay. You're doing a lunch, but a lot of times you're presenting and you say you bring a lunch into an office. You're presenting while everyone else is eating. And then quickly you might grab a bite, but you don't have that freedom just to sit for an hour. A lot of times reps don't even want to do that, where you're sitting leisurely, having a nice relaxing lunch at Panera or wherever. A lot of times you're working during those lunches because that's the time that you can get, quality time with your staff is by scheduling those lunches and being in front of them. CRM. We just did a great call on Monday about CRM. So definitely check that out because we give a lot of great tips, especially if you're going through the interview process. But when you're updating your CRM every day, again, a lot of times you're doing it after hours. You're running around from office to office. I was terrible when I started. I did all my notes at the end of the day. I wanted to go, get in front of as many doctors as possible. And then I'll put my call notes in at the end of the day. Now, it might not be the best system, but that's what I did. So a lot of these, you're not done at the end of the day at 4 or 5 o'clock. So you're home maybe after the gym. You're sitting and putting notes in at 8 o'clock after dinner. But again, you technically make your own schedule, but when you're behind in your number and you're trying to hit a quota, that all goes out the window, guys. You have to hustle to consistently do that. So it changes that schedule. It makes it a little bit more unpredictable, but these are some of the things that you're not going to hear, and it's still all these fields are amazing, guys. So I don't want you to take away that, wow, he's being all negative. I'm not. I'm just being real, that these are the things that no one told me when I started. And then I got out there and I'm like, wow, it's a little, this is a little different. This isn't exactly what I thought, and then you adjust, and you figure it out. But it's not just complete freedom where you do whatever you want, and you have this cushy job and you're out playing golf a couple of days a week with your friends and going to, happy hours and meeting up with people for lunch. Like, no, your schedule gets unpredictable, so you got to be prepared for that. So another thing is you basically have to get used to being a professional interrupter. All right. So what do I mean by that? I mean, majority of your calls are not scheduled. You're going in there. If you just wait to schedule calls and that's the only time you're going to meet with doctors, guys, you're never going to get ahead. There's too many doctors in your territory. Now while there could be a couple doctors that really help make your number, you got to get in front of a lot of people to even impact, those couple that are really going to blow out your number, but they don't just come to you out of the blue. So you have to be aggressive and just start knocking on doors and showing up, unexpected, and then the doctors are always busy. The staff is always busy. You're going to walk in there after training and feel really good about your product, really good about your sales skills, and in training, everything was great. You're doing role plays where you're closing the doctor. You get out there and people are looking at you like, what the hell are you doing here? The receptionist is pissed off. Another rep coming in, she takes your card, she just puts it in the desk. She takes your detail aid, throws it out. You feel it's uncomfortable, but that's part of the job, guys. So you have to get used to just being able to professionally and respectfully, get a few seconds, a minute, a couple of minutes with a doctor when they're busy, because they're always busy. So you're going to be interrupting a lot. At first, it's awkward, but you get used to it, and you develop that skill where you are professional, where you do, read the room. There's a difference with a doctor running in between where he can give you a second until, and then there's a difference between interrupting when a doctor, does have a few seconds to talk to you, as opposed to, jumping in front of him while he's like, Joe, I got a ton of patients. I'm way behind today. Now you got to read the room. You don't want to interrupt. Like, no, doc, I got to talk to you right now. Guys, be respectful. You could fight another day, live to fight another day, so you don't ruin that relationship. But you still have to balance that and being aggressive enough to interrupt. Because if you wait for the doctors just to say, Joe, I got 10 minutes or 20 minutes for you, guys, it's rarely going to happen. It's going to be a quick, what's up? What's new? What do you got today? And you got to have that messaging prepared. Next, relationships. So you're going to hear all about relationships. Relationships are great, guys. Okay. But it's not all about relationships. Don't think that if you just keep building relationships, then that's going to drive your number and that's going to make you successful. Because what no one tells you is you can have your brother or father or mother or sister, that's the physician. And they can obviously they love you and they can love your product. Now what happens when insurances get involved? When it's not on a formulary, when the hospital, it's not part of their GPO, so they can't use it there. You can have all the relationships in the world, but if it's not covered, if the hospital can't access it, the doctor can't access that drug, then no one's going to use it. Then the relationships mean nothing at that point. So it's always great to be building relationships, always great to get new contacts, but it's not just that's going to make you successful. So you got to be prepared for that, guys. That's one of the things that, that punched me in the gut when I left Oregon and then went from Oregon to Boston Scientific. And I was calling on a lot of the pain specialists that I used to call on at previously selling a Avinza and now selling a spinal cord stimulator. I had some doctors that absolutely loved me for Avinza. They were good friends. I went to Boston Scientific, start talking about spinal cord stimulators, and then they wanted nothing to do with me. Either they didn't do spinal cord stim, they didn't really believe in that yet, they weren't trained on it, or they just believed in using other modalities to treat patients, to treat their pain. So now I have a different product and it's like I'm a different person. And don't get me wrong, it could be vice versa. There were some doctors that didn't care about Avinza, but once I started selling spinal cord stim, they became some of my biggest, supporters. So it's not just about relationships. A lot of times your products and the reimbursement can change that quickly. Okay, so be prepared for that. And lastly, it gets emotionally draining, guys. You can't let it overcome you. You're getting rejected all day long. Okay. And there's times that you could see 15 doctors, maybe go to 15 offices, maybe only see, 3 or 4 doctors, and maybe only have one positive conversation. Now, don't forget, you're getting rejected by receptionists. Sometimes you go in the back and a nurse is telling you, sorry, the doctor can't see you today. Not a good day. A lot of times they're so overwhelmed with patients and reps coming in that they're mad and they take it out on you. They're having a bad day. They're going to take it out on you. They're not going to take it out on the patients. So that rejection it wears on you. So you got to build that thick skin. And most of you will get used to this, guys. You'll first start the first few months, like any job, is tough. You're learning the lay of the land. You're learning new products, new company protocols, and then you're getting yelled at and, told today's not a good day over and over and over, or no, I'm fine with the product I'm using over and over and over. It becomes mentally draining. So you have to be prepared to handle that. It's not going to be every other call is a great call and you're closing. It's a lot of driving to accounts, a lot of admin work, a lot of waiting for doctors. So one of the key things that I learned, and I learned this, quickly, I thought I would be selling 90% of the time, just having conversations. You're not. 90% of the time is driving and waiting, and your admin too. But only about 7 to 10% of the time is actually face-to-face selling. So it's not much, guys. So when you get in those moments, you got to really take advantage and be prepared for those conversations. Okay. So next, we're going to pivot to device. All right, device, completely different animal. So for a lot of young guys out there that are saying, I don't care, I'll do pharma, device, that's not the right answer, guys. You need to do more research. You need to really know what you're getting yourself into. I mean, for me, it's like saying, I don't care. I think I'm going to be a teacher or a fireman, and believe me, that's how I feel, that they're drastically different. The only similarities are, yes, you do have clinical conversations with doctors. That's definitely a similarity. You do have to call on offices. You do have to travel from, in your car most of the day. You're calling on the same contacts, but the buying cycle and the conversations and the daily work schedule are very different. So for a lot of medical sales reps, it's very rare for a medical sales rep, let me back up, that they're just selling about the product and that's all they do. They don't have any OR coverage. No, guys, it's the opposite. A lot of times, even as a territory manager, you're going to have to cover cases. So you could be in a case. I mean, I've been at hospitals right when they open, when the doctors come in at 6 a.m, meeting with patients. That means I'm leaving my house sometimes at 4 a.m, depending on how far I have to go to get to that hospital. So your day starts early. And then there's days that you could have an 8 o'clock case that doesn't go on till 11, 12, 1, 2 in the afternoon because it gets delayed and challenges, things happen. So you got to be prepared to not be in control of your schedule. You're going to be canceling a lot of family activities. You could have lunch with friends scheduled, school, sports with your kids, their activities after school. Got to be prepared. A lot of times, if you got products that are being used in a hospital, in operating rooms or in cath labs, there's things that are going to change where you are unable to get to those events. So be prepared for that unpredictability, in medical sales and device. It's very different from pharma. Pharma, you might be doing a lot of that admin work later on, but device, you could still be in a hospital till late at night. And I've literally have been in cases as early, I've been at hospitals as early as 6 in the morning till 3 in the morning, depending on how late those cases went or how early they were booked. So be prepared. It's not the same as pharma. The purchasing is also different. Now for me, I've done both. I felt that pharma actually was more challenging, in terms of getting a confirmation, a yes, closing a deal. Because the difference with pharma and device will look something like this. You'll walk in, see the doctor either in the hospital, a surgery center, or say in his office. You talk to Dr. Jones, everything goes well, goes, you know what, Joe, I really like what you have to say. Great. Dr. Jones, when is your next case for this XYZ procedure? You know what? I have one coming up next Tuesday. Will you use me for that case? Yes. You go in, you speak to the scheduler. They put you on the books that you're going to be at that case. After the case, you submit your paperwork to purchasing. You get a purchase order, and that is your sale. So it's more concrete. Pharma is different. Pharma, you get doctors that they're not going to sit here and go, yep, Joe, you know what? This next patient, watch me write the script for this next patient. And then you'll see that, I'm giving you credit and using your product. It doesn't work that way. They say to you, you know what? I love what you have to say, Joe. This is great. I'm going to give it to, my next patient that has, whatever, disease state that meets this product. And I'm going to prescribe this drug to them. You don't know. That could be today. That could be 2 weeks from now. So you don't know if you made a sale sometimes weeks in advance, weeks later, because even after they get that, they write that prescription and then they go to the pharmacy to get it filled. Then the company is contracted with all major pharmacies in that area. They get that prescription data, and sometimes it's weeks behind. Sometimes, depending on the company and the system they're using, it could be a month or two behind. So that conversation that you had with Dr. Jones today, you might not see the results of that until April. And that's real. So there's times that you're like, I'm having great momentum. Why do my February numbers suck? Because your February numbers are actually reflective of the conversations you were having back in December. It takes time. So to me, that was more difficult to judge how I'm doing on a more live basis. Device was easier to figure out, am I doing poorly or am I doing well? Pharma, that's a little different. So you got to be prepared for that, guys. Some people can like that. Some, it depends on, what you like, but I just want you guys to be prepared that it's not that instant gratification that you may be used to, on the device side. And again, back to the operating room and device. You're in that operating room, but it's still the doctor's operating room. They are still the ones that are in charge. So a lot of times when things go wrong, you're the first person to get blamed. You got to be prepared for that, guys. Shit happens. We're dealing with patients' health. We're dealing, potentially with life-saving products. It gets real in there. So if things aren't going smoothly, be prepared. Doctors, they can get pretty nasty in there. I'm not saying that's going to happen every day, because then there's days when things go well. The doctors are high-fiving you. Joe, great job today. You really gave me some great input. Thank you for the support. That feels awesome. Or if you have a lot of patient interaction, where your product, after the case, you have to work with the patients to help them utilize that device. That's awesome too some days. Some days it's stressful, but the reality is when you're in that operating room, a lot of times things go on that have nothing to do with you, but you're still the one that gets blamed because you're not the doctor. The doctor is not going to blame the patient. Sometimes they get mad at other staff, but a lot of times they can get mad at the rep because they're technically, are like the easy one to blame, when things get a little tough. So be prepared. In those ORs, a lot of crazy stuff happens, and it's not always, an amazing outcome where you're leaving there, feeling great. But again, the flip side is when things do go well, there's no better feeling than getting that, that applause from a physician or a patient that is thanking you that this device has helped change their life. I mean, I've been a part of some of these phone calls and conversations. It's very, very rewarding. Next, again, the pressure. And this is along the same lines same with device, pharma too. It doesn't matter, guys. Guys, when you have to hit a number every month, every quarter, typically it's every quarter that your rate ranked. Sometimes things aren't going well. Okay. And there's a lot of pressure. And some companies, it could be 1 or 2 quarters in a row that you're not hitting your goal, and they're going to start, getting on you. And that's a stressful situation to be in, because a lot of times you're doing everything right and things just aren't clicking. It happens to all of us. Sometimes, I've been in cases, or I've had procedures that got canceled towards the end of the month because of challenges with the patient. Their blood work came back and it wasn't positive. Their, patients got sick. Doctors had to cancel because their scheduling changed. They don't care. The company doesn't care and go, oh, okay, we'll put that and make a note that you actually really hit your number if we counted those 4 cases. Guys, they don't give a shit. At the end of the day, it could show you were 72% to goal. And that hurts. That means, if you don't hit your number, a lot of times there could be a big bonus associated with that. So there's a lot of pressure because there's things that happen. A lot is in our control, but a lot of times there's things that aren't in your control. And you got to be prepared to navigate through that because it's not always, it doesn't always go smoothly. But at the end of the day, the companies don't care. It's your number. Did you hit your number? That's the most important thing. Next, we're going to touch on, just for a couple of minutes, on capital equipment sales, because I know I get asked this a lot, and I was getting a lot of requests to talk about this week. So capital equipment is typically, not always, it's typically a promoted position. Some of you could be out there just starting and have capital roles, and that's great. But more often than not, it's an individual that understands the medical landscape, understands what it's like to influence physicians and other key players along the process, and they have capital roles, more often on the medical device side because there's few, if any, that I know of on the pharma side. So for capital equipment, the one thing you have to be prepared for: very, very long sales cycles. So if you're expecting to come home every day with a sale, a purchase order, or anything that you're used to, that instant gratification in pharma or device, you're not going to get that, guys. So you got to get used to celebrating those small wins because, I sold products, so when I was at Stereotaxis, we sold a robotic cardiac ablation system that sometimes we're working on deals for 3 years. 3 years. I still remember, and I'm not going to bring up the hospital or the individual, but one individual that we had everything going smoothly. They had a room that they were going to use us in. The budget was approved. They had the champions in the hospital. We had the everyone from the CFO down that all wanted this. And then one person made one comment that derailed the whole buying process. So it was almost over 2 years of work went down the drain. And that hurts. It really hurts. So you got to be prepared for those long sales cycles and to celebrate the small wins. Okay. If you get an appointment booked with Dr. Jones, that's a win. You got to treat that as a sale. Because sometimes I worked on individuals, chiefs of different departments, for over a year. When I got a lunch or a meeting booked with them, I took my wife out to dinner to celebrate, because that's even though I didn't make a sale, you got to celebrate those small wins because the process of an actual sale takes so long. And a lot of times when you're dealing in capital sales, you're dealing with multiple players, multiple decision makers. You start with, say, a physician in the department that likes your product. That's great. Now you got to get someone to champion it. A champion means someone that actually, has some say within the department. It's not just any doctor. Just because any doctor likes it, it could be a doctor that only has privileges at that facility, that they're there once every other month. Now, odds are it's going to be difficult for that physician to get your product pushed along because they just don't have enough say at that account. So you have to get a champion, or you have to get the chief of department, or then after you get the chief, then you have to get the VP of the department. Then from there, you might have to get the CFO or even a CEO to sign off. Different admin. You might need biomed involved. You might need tech support. Purchasing. All these different players, can affect positively or negatively you getting that sale moving forward. So you got to be able to navigate all these different players. It gets very challenging. It gets political. Sometimes everyone can love it. They don't have the budget for it, or they don't have the space to put that in. It's a lot of things can change it, guys. So you got to be prepared to navigate that environment. And then lastly, typically with capital roles, they're bigger territories, and you want the bigger territory because there's usually the more opportunities you have. I think all of us would want that, but what comes with that is more travel. So one of my capital roles, I was covering half the country, literally from the Mississippi east. And it was, it's intense. You're on flights, 2-3 days a week flying across the country. So sometimes, for a 5-minute meeting, and then you're getting back on a plane and flying out. I mean, there was times, I was on a 3-hour flight down to Texas, had a meeting, got right back on the plane and came back home. So you got to get used to that too. That's part of the role. If you're looking for a capital role that just covers, the state of Rhode Island, probably not going to happen, because very few capital products are profitable enough for just one small state to be able to help someone, or someone's going to be able to achieve, to be able to hit their quota or their number. So typically they're usually Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Southeast, Midwest. It's usually a regional role that you're getting yourself into. But just wanted to touch a little bit on capital equipment, but I think this is a good time for us to take a break and see if there's any questions from the crowd. James?
A couple questions, Joe. Nicholas Saslow. You're going to love this one, Joe.
Good. I love it.
Would you advise someone to go to medical sales college before getting into medical device industry?
Medical sales college is great school. Okay, here's the reality about medical sales college. They do an outstanding job of clinically training you. They're going to train you. Typically, it's spine trauma procedures that they train you for, and they do an outstanding job of that. But if you're going to medical sales college and you want to get in cardiology, a lot of those it's not gonna be the fit there. All right, so you can get into a dermatology role, an aesthetics role. That's not going to help you for aesthetics. You can get in an anesthesia role, a pain role. Typically, these procedures, they're not going to teach you for that. If you want an ortho or trauma role, then yeah, medical sales college could be a great opportunity. The difference between us with the RepPath Academy and medical sales college is we're going to teach you to be a better candidate for any role. All right. So no matter what company you get into, they're going to train you on the clinical end. So even students that go to medical sales college and get a job at Stryker or Zimmer, Smith and Nephew, wherever it is, the company doesn't go, oh, you went to medical sales college? No problem. You don't have to do the training. Just show up 3 weeks later when you're ready to hit the field, or show up 2 months later whenever we're done with clinical training. You could relax. No, guys, they still train you just like any other rep, because they got to make sure that you're trained on their products and go through their training process and their protocols before you get in the field. What we're going to do, we're going to make you a better candidate no matter what field you want to go into. So you're going to outshine reps that are going for any of those other roles, whether it's pharma, device, diagnostics, capital equipment. We're going to help make you a better candidate for all that, because we're not going to focus on clinical knowledge. That's not what gets people jobs. It's what are you saying in an interview? What are you doing on your resume to stand out? How are you networking? Are you just reaching out to people and saying, I'm looking for a new job. Can you help me out? And this is what happens a lot of times. We teach you all that. We're going to work on your LinkedIn profile. They don't do any of this. They say they do. All these other schools say they do, but their focus is clinical. Ours is not clinical. Ours is making you a better candidate. So it's a very big difference. So more than welcome to, do whatever you want in your career and start out and go to medical sales college. Again, I'm never going to talk negative about another school, but if you want to become a better candidate with more options, join the RepPath Academy.
I'm sure there's a huge price difference too.
Huge price difference, but I don't get into that. I don't want to, but not even close.
Yeah. But we have Sahir Miller. What should I be focusing on as an associate candidate?
What should you be focusing on as an associate candidate? I mean, that's a very broad question. Number one, you got to know where do you want to work? What specialty are you looking for? Do you want to get into device? Is it pharma? Do you want to get into ortho? Do you want to get into cardiology like we were talking about? I mean, you got to have more specificity. A lot of people think I'm just going to be open to everything, and that's good. I do agree that if a job comes your way and it sounds interesting, you don't want to turn it down because no, I'll only do cardiology. You got to have an open mind, guys, but you have to have a game plan, and a focus of what you're going after. That's key. And when you know that, so for instance, if you want to go into cardiology, focus on those cardiology roles. It's okay to look at other ones too, but make those main ones your focus of what you really want to do. And then when you find an opening, you're being laser focused and aggressive, trying to reach out to as many employees, reps, managers, doesn't matter what, reach out to as many people as possible in that specific division, that are closest linked to that territory. And you want to get on phone calls with them. You're not just having conversations to just learn more about the job. Yes, that's important, but you want to position yourself as the solution to whatever role you're going for. That's the key. A lot of times you guys get on these calls and you'll ask the sales rep, what's it like a day in the life? And they'll say, access is a big challenge, or, pricing is also an obstacle. We're more expensive than the competition. And all you guys do is take notes. Oh, that's interesting. No, guys, they're giving you an objection that you're going to face when you're in the field. So use that time as a mini interview. Those are all interviews when you're reaching out to people. So you're reaching out to people about this associate role. It was Samir, when you're reaching out to people for this associate role, you got to be positioning yourself as the solution to the challenges they're having. If they talk about access, then you got to talk about how you overcame access issues in your previous role. And it doesn't have to be a medical sales role. This is where we work with you to help your transferable skills to be able to handle those objections and illustrate how you were able to overcome those in the past. That's the key. Don't just have conversations just to get info. You got to have the conversations, but when they bring up challenges that typical reps have or they're facing, provide a solution that you've done in the past, and then they could see how you're going to bring that same, potentially same approach to solve this issue. But at least, show them that you're listening to what the challenges are and trying to think proactively of how to solve that.
All right. We have Greg Olinsky. I keep hearing ride-alongs. Can you explain what that actually looks like during a real day?
Okay. Yeah, ride-alongs are very important. So a lot of you during the interview process, you're going to, it depends. It could be the shortest interview process that I know of. There are 2 interviews, which is rare, but it could go up to 7 or 8 interviews in the process. But throughout that process, say you'll meet with, you'll speak to an HR personnel, or you'll speak to the recruiter, about the role. Then they'll schedule a Zoom call. They might do an assessment. They might ask you different questions. And then if that goes well, they can forward you on to maybe a territory manager to speak to them. Then after that, maybe you'll meet with the hiring manager. After the hiring manager, they might bring you back for a second interview, another interview with the hiring manager and his or her boss, who's the regional director or VP. And then towards the end of the process, they'll do something called a ride-along. All right. So you could do this during the interview process, and you also can do this, when you work for a company where your manager will ride with you every so often, and they basically critique you, help coach you, and try to make you a better rep and help you in your territory. But during the interview process, if you guys can leave with one takeaway when you're on a ride along, so you'll spend a day with a territory manager, an associate, whoever it is, where you'll spend a day with them in the field. You might observe a couple cases. You might call on doctors' offices, in and out of offices, in and out of surgery centers, hospitals. It depends. But you're going to see a real day. That's the whole goal. When you do this, the number one thing, if you don't do anything else, keep your phone off. Get a pad and pen and take notes. Come with questions. Be clinically curious and keep the phone in your pocket, guys. Because I've seen too much of this where, you'll see reps, they're constantly on the ride along and they're doing this. They're in cases, they're doing this. Guys, if you want to lose out in a process, then pull your phone out and be checking text messages, texting with friends, going on social media. Guys, it is a red flag. Okay. Keep your phone away. Keep it on silent. Keep it in your computer bag. Keep it in your pocket. I don't care. Keep it in the locker if you're in a hospital. Just don't have it out checking your phone. You'll have plenty of opportunities throughout the day. If you're married, if you got friends that reach out to you every day, tell your wife, tell your friends, tell your family, guys, I'm going to ride along tomorrow. I'm going to be inaccessible all day. So only if it's an absolute emergency, reach out to me. And you could check your phone during lunch. You could check it in the car, go into the next call. But when you're in front of customers, when you're in hospitals, when you're in offices, keep your phone away. If you come with a pad and paper and be prepared before you get into this ride along with a bunch of questions, clinically curious, guys, remember that. Be clinically curious. If you're going to cover, if you're meeting with a rep tomorrow and you're doing a ride along, you're on the phone with him ahead of time and saying, where are we going? Which doctors are we seeing? So you want to look up those doctors, do your research. What cases are we going to see? Oh, you're going to see, a craniotomy. I don't know, an appendectomy. So you're going to be going online that night, looking up appendectomy procedures, looking up the products that company sells in that procedure. You're going to have questions. I mean, one of the biggest things that comes up whenever you're doing a ride along, there's a lot of acronyms. The medical is insane with the acronyms, guys. So you want to make sure that you should have a lot of questions. What's an SVT? What's an AFib? You're going to get a lot of these crazy acronyms. What's MAC? This is some of the acronyms that are out there. So you want to make sure that you're asking these questions, but doing that research ahead of time. Don't just go into the calls like, this is fun. Where are we going today? Like, no, you should have that mapped out because you should be having that conversation with that rep or whoever you're riding with ahead of time, and have a pen and pad out and phone away, and you will do well. If you do those two things, you're already going to be steps ahead.
Marcus D. Williams, how much of the day is actually selling versus relationship maintenance?
Again, like I said before, the selling time is less than 10%, and maintenance is a big portion of the day. Again, the majority of the day is traveling from account to account and then waiting, to meet with physicians. But the busier you get, the bigger your territory, the bigger your volume of business is, then the more time is going to be spent on maintenance because you have more customers. So, it could be, at the beginning, it could be zero time because you're still building this. But as you build it more, you get more and more customers. They're going to have more and more needs, and that's the part you have to handle, because sometimes it gets overwhelming and you're like, shit, I don't even have time to get another customer. I don't even have time to do another lunch. I can't even meet new people. I mean, this is one of the challenges, one of my first device jobs where I had a lot of clinical support responsibilities. And then I also had sales responsibilities. So to go and try to get new customers, try to build new business when they're like, sorry, Joe, tomorrow we have 3 cases. I have no time. I'm in the operating room from morning till night. I can't even get to doctors. Or there's times I had appointments that I had to cancel because I had cases. But so the busier you get, it's going to take over. That maintenance mode is, becomes, a greater percentage, but that also means you're making more money. That means that your territory is growing. So that's a good thing. So it's hard to put an exact number on that. Like I said before, selling time is a little less than 10%. And then that maintenance time is going to grow and grow and grow as you grow that territory.
I got Nina Patel. Joe, how often do you actually get to eat a real lunch at a table, or is it always in the car?
It's a great question, Nina. I mean, the reality is this, when you get in the field, if you don't have a lunch scheduled that day and you're not, booked, you don't have any cases or anything else that's really tearing you in a different direction. If you want to sit at a Starbucks, you want to sit at a restaurant and have a lunch, then by all means do it. Most reps that I know, I was like this. I was the type, you're by yourself. So do I want to sit at a restaurant for an hour just to have a cheeseburger? I mean, I'd rather just grab something quick, sit in my car, eat it, and go and continue on with my day. I mean, that was me. But if you really want to sit and have a lunch and you don't have anything else booked, that's up to you. But I think you're going to feel, the more you get out there, because you're on your own, you're going to get more and more things to do. The lunch part is going to be the last of your worries, at least for most reps that I know. You're out there to work, get business done. You're going to have plenty of time to eat. You're not going to starve yourself. But it's going to be up to you if you want to sit and have a lunch for an hour by yourself. A lot of times people just keep the day going and move quicker.
I got NYC Girl Boss Moves. Is the schedule totally different depending on what type of device or product you sell?
Yes. There's thousands of different products, but that's a great question because it depends. Your day and schedule can change because there's some devices that you have to be in the OR with the doctor for them to use that product. You have to be there. They can't just use it, grab it from storage or, the equipment room, pull that product out. Then there's products where you have to be there. And then you also have patient maintenance. So like in spinal cord stim, you had to be at the cases for the doctors to use you. They can't do it without you. And then after the case, you're sitting with the patients to help them program their stimulator. Then they leave with their cell phone and they can call you 24/7 if they have an issue. Now that's intense. Then there's procedures that you don't have to be there at all. You teach your doctor how to use a product. The purchasing department buys, it could, like say for disposables, there's a lot of disposable products. Once they know how to use it, you might train them on a case or two and they're like, we're good to go. And then they're using those products while you're not even there. So you're essentially making money without being there. Those are ideal positions to be in. That happens a lot in diagnostics. So a lot of you guys that might not even know what diagnostics is, that's selling whatever test. It could be urine drug testing, blood testing, MRIs, CAT scans, all those things. Once you get a doctor that really believes in you, your product, your company, they're sending patients to your facility, for instance, to get MRIs, and you don't even have to be there, and you're just maintaining that relationship, continuing to sell the value of why they should use your company and your product, and you're not even there. So it really depends on what you're doing, and that's going to change the amount of time that you're spent, whatever the product is. But it's a wide range of products, so it definitely matters. If there are questions, you have an interview coming up. I mean, again, this is what we do at the Academy. We walk everyone through this so they understand what they're getting into and they don't go in blind. Because if you don't know, you could get into something that you really don't want to do on a daily basis. And it could be, a lot of OR coverage that's not for you, or it's very little selling and you want to sell a lot. It depends, guys. So it's really dependent on that product.
All right. We got Kelly Padmore, nurse practitioner. I'm a nurse practitioner considering the transition. Does the day feel clinical enough to still feel meaningful, or does it start to feel purely transactional?
No, I mean, again, that depends on the products. You could be in a very clinical role, and if that's what you're going for, then absolutely, there's a ton of roles out there, especially for, individuals with nursing backgrounds, that they do really, really well because they're used to that clinical setting. They're used to interacting with physicians and working in a clinical capacity, not only with physicians, but also patients. So it could be very clinical. It could be split between half clinical and then half the day is selling. And then it could be, mostly selling and very little clinical. It really depends on the role.
We have Jake Hollandale. How many hours is a real day when you include drive time, admin, follow-up, and prep work for tomorrow? Is 10 to 12 hours common?
10 to 12 hours every day. This is where I'm very realistic. I don't know why when you get in this industry, and I'm sure this is in other industries too, where people like to brag on how long they work, how many hours they put in. And a lot of times they exaggerate. When I started in device, they're like, you're going to put in 70, 80-hour weeks. Guys, there's, once in a while I did have a Saturday case, but that was rare. So you're working a 5-day work week, 80 hours. Just think of that. That's 16 hours a day. That means that because I don't consider when you left your house. I consider when you get to the facility, that's when work starts. But say you even want to include when you leave your house.
He was including the drive time.
Okay. So you're leaving your house. So that means 80 hours is 16 hours a day. That means you leave your house at 7 a.m. and you don't get home till 11 p.m. every night. That's ridiculous. You might have a day like that. You might have 2 days like that. But to have that 5 days a week consistently, that's crazy. So to work to me, the realistic answer is about 45 to 50 hours a week in device, and I would say, it could be a low end of 25 to 30 in pharma. And I'm going to get a lot of shit for saying that, but that's just real. I'm sure a lot of companies now, they track you where they don't want you, they're tracking your, when you're going from office to office. So reps, have to juggle that and stay out a little later. But realistically, guys, that's the typical hours. It's, but then let me just bring up one more point with that. If you're answering an email at 9 o'clock at night or sending a text or doing admin work, that to me that's not part of your day. So if you're going to count that, then yeah, you might get up higher in those numbers. But realistically, it's nothing that is so incredibly grueling. Typically you're going to be in that 40 to 50 hour work week range.
I have Neha Gupta, pharmacist here, exploring options outside of retail. Is there a version of the day that's less road warrior and more account management?
Yeah. It depends on the territory. So, if you don't want to be in the car, if that's not for you and you want just to just be an account manager at a few accounts, I don't know if medical sales is for you. You got to be prepared to be traveling. You got to be prepared for many of these roles to be in the car. So if you want more of an account management role, then for instance, there's a company like in BioSense Webster, which is a division of Johnson & Johnson. They have clinical specialists in the cath lab. Amazing company, great employees, great products. They, friends with a lot of these guys. They typically, a lot of their clinical specialists, can work at 1, 2, or 3 accounts, and that's it. Some work at one account and that's it. They're at the same account every day, morning to night, covering cases with the same group of doctors. And that could be for you, but it might not be for someone else where they're like, I don't want to be in the same account every day. I want something new. I want to change a pace. And so you're going to be traveling more. But for most medical sales roles, you got to expect to be in the car and doing some travel.
For the record, no one wants to work for the Johnson family, Joe.
Well, not if you're a Jets fan.
No, not if you're a Jets fan.
Yeah. Somebody's a little bitter over here. But,
very bitter. The worst owner in sports. I got Susan Yeomans. do companies give you a set schedule when you start, or are you basically handed a territory and told good luck?
It depends. So if you're in a territory, I'll give you a couple examples where the previous sales rep say got promoted and still works at the company. They're going to transfer all their accounts, all their information. You're going to meet with them. You're going to meet with your manager. You're going to go over the physicians, go over, the targets that are using you, any appointments, any cases that are booked. They're going to transfer all that over to you. All right. So that's a pretty good situation, but again, that comes with challenges too, because if that territory is doing well, you have to continue to grow that. Now vice versa, it could be a brand new territory. It could be an expansion and you're walking into that and they have no information. That happens too. So you're going to learn that in the interview process and figure out, and know ahead of time, is this an expansion territory? Is this a new territory with no business? Or is this something that's been established and there's, a ton of information and company support, physician support? So it really depends, but you're going to learn that before you sit down. You're going to learn that before you take the role, because you'll learn that in the interview process.
Daniel Ruiz, he said, how do you handle when you show up to a surgeon's office and the whole schedule shifted and now nothing you planned works?
It's part of the job. It's just that simple. It's going to happen all the time, guys. When you're working in the hospital settings, you're working in the clinical settings, shit happens and you just got to adjust. So if you're not someone that is very adaptable, if you're like an OCD type personality, that if things don't go this way that you planned, it's going to really derail you, then this is definitely not the field for you. You got to be able to adapt. You got to be able to just, handle changes on a fly. I mean, there's things that are going to happen. One of the things that shocked me when I first started, my first manager, I loved him. I thought he was the greatest guy, ever. And then we did a realignment 6 months in, and they moved me to another district manager in another district. I was crushed. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then I obviously developed a good relationship with my next manager. And then 3 months later, they did another realignment. And then I had another manager. My first company, I had 6 managers in a little over 2 years. So I got used to the changes, and that's just part of this business. Things constantly change, directives change, hospital, clinical setting, patients, all doctor schedules, everything. Things happen, and you just got to be able to adjust and handle those changes, because then you'll do well. If not, then this is not for you.
Last question for you, Joe. I got Anthony Serafano. So I get you're calling on physicians, but who else are you interacting with throughout the day? Like nurses, OR staff, office managers. How do you manage all those different relationships in one building?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was one of the things that I was intimidated by when I first got into a hospital sales role. You're looking at that giant hospital, like that's your account, and that's not it, guys. For instance, my first hospital sales role was at Organon, where I was calling on anesthesiologists. So that giant building now shrinks to one department. That's all I care about. I'm worried about, of course, I'm going to call on those physicians, CRNAs, other nurses, other clinical staff, office staff, but it's typically in that one department. Or you could call a couple departments, but you're not focusing on the entire hospital at once. There's very few roles that are like that. That's a lot to take in. So it'll become more manageable when you realize, oh, I'm just calling on anesthesiologists, and then you got to navigate yourself. And this is where the work comes in. You don't need business. I mean, Hackensack was one of my biggest accounts. They had 70 anesthesiologists. I didn't get business from all 70. I had my key users, and then I had my champions and, different, the chief of the department, different people that would, that utilize our product, but a lot didn't. But you focus on the ones that, this is how you run your business. You don't have to get every single person in that account is what I'm saying. you're going to see it becomes much more manageable when you're just focusing on a certain group or a certain department.
Well, that's it today, Joe.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you, James, and pleasure, man. Sorry about the Johnson family crushing your dreams, but
it's heartbreaking.
That's your fault. That's your problem for being a Jets fan, buddy.
It's my father's fault. I blame him.
My dad's a Giants fan. I didn't care what he thought. I'm a Bears fan. So, but anyway, thank you for that. Thank you guys for all the great questions. Again, if you want a copy of this podcast, go on the RepPath Academy on YouTube, subscribe. It's 100% free. But more importantly, guys, a lot of you guys struggling to get in. A lot of you feel like you're on an island. Don't keep waiting, guys. Because I see this all the time. People, they reach out and go, I want to do it on my own. I hope you could. And God bless you if you could. But a lot of times you just delay. If you really want this, why delay month after month after month trying to figure it out when I've been doing this my whole career and trying to develop this strategy for you guys to help you break in? It really works. So reach out to me to more about the RepPath Academy. Go on the website, reppath.com. And lastly, anybody that's a lobby member, as always, guys, give the promo code Licata, Licata. When you reach out to me, you see it there at the bottom of your screen. Reach out to me with that promo code Licata so you can get additional discounts. But other than that, guys, thank you so much. Have a great week. And I'll talk to you guys next week on Monday. Take care.